Leung Chun-ying gives reassurance about Hong Kong economy. Carson Young jailed for 6 years for money laundering. And Crimea referendum worsens Ukraine's crisis.
Good evening. Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying stressed today that Beijing has not changed its stance on Hong Kong. At the end of his 4-day trip to Beijing, Leung said the city shouldn't be making unnecessary speculation about its autonomy. Diane To has our top story.
It's fueled speculation over the past few days, when Premier Li Keqiang omitted the phrases Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong and a high degree of autonomy in his government work report on Wednesday. Did it signal a change in Beijing's stance on Hong Kong? Leung Chun-ying insisted today people have been reading too much into it.
The constitutional context for political reform in Hong Kong and the high degree of autonomy enjoyed by Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong have both been enshrined in the Basic Law.
He said people don't need to and shouldn't make what he called unnecessary speculation. Leung was also asked whether comments made yesterday on universal suffrage by Beijing's official in charge of Hong Kong affairs, Zhang Dejiang, meant the central government has ruled out public and party nominations for chief executive candidates. The CE responded by saying Zhang reiterated political reform must be based firmly on the provisions of the Basic Law. That is, a chief executive will be elected by universal suffrage after a nominating committee puts forward candidates to stand for election. Leung called on society to offer suggestions in a pragmatic and rational manner.
Well, we need to work together on consensus. I think it is a consensus in Hong Kong that it is no easy task to get 2/3 supermajority among SETCO members to get the chief executive to consent and to get the approval of the National People's Congress Standing Committee. But we need to work on the consensus to deliver universal suffrage in Hong Kong in 2017.
Also today, Deputy Director of the Central Government's Liaison Office, Yin Xiaojing, said Beijing is sincere in implementing universal suffrage in Hong Kong. She insisted Zhang wasn't trying to limit constitutional development here. Diane To, TVB News.
A group of Democratic Party members rallied here in Hong Kong demanding what they call genuine universal suffrage. They staged a protest outside the central government's liaison office. The group raised concerns about Hong Kong's autonomy and Beijing tightening its grip on the territory. They called on the central government not to change its policy on Hong Kong.
Recently, the Chinese government want to threaten Hong Kong people that it is Beijing for the ultimate decision for the future of Hong Kong. It's against the principle of the Joint Declaration and also the promise made by the Basic Law. So it is important now for the Chinese government, especially President Xi Jinping, to stand up to make a continued promise to Hong Kong people that the one country, two system should include the Hong Kong people ruling Hong Kong, a high degree of autonomy.
The owner of Birmingham City Football Club, Carson Young, has been given a 6-year prison term for money laundering. The judge said the sentence served as a deterrent to others who may be tempted to commit such crimes. Joao de Silva reports.
The fall from grace of a self-made man. That's how 54-year-old Carson Young was described in court today as his defense team delivered its mitigation plea. Graham Harris told the court how Young came from humble beginnings and rose through the ranks by working hard. He also argued that the amount of money laundered was not as high as the $721 million as stated in court. But District Court Judge Douglas Yao wasn't buying it. He said the law will come down on those who commit such crimes in full force and that the money that was laundered still amounted to a staggering figure, $721 million or not. The judge said even though Young might not have come up with the scheme himself, the illegal dealings couldn't have gone on for such a long time and on such a large scale without his skills and connections with Macau casinos. He also noted that several deposits could be traced back to Macau Casino VIP rooms.
The judge said the prison sentence is aimed at protecting Hong Kong's reputation as an international financial centre by acting as a strong deterrent to those in a position to commit such crimes.
The police welcomed the sentence.
The message is clear. Okay, don't get yourself involved in any money laundering activities or assist other people to deal with money of crime process.
Yu declined to say whether there is an ongoing investigation into the source of the money that was laundered through 5 bank accounts in the name of Young and his father between 2001 and 2007. The prosecution will apply to have Young's assets confiscated on April 3rd. João da Silva, TVB News.
A court in Malaysia has sentenced a couple to death by hanging for murdering their Indonesian domestic helper. The defendants, age 56 and 58, are expected to appeal. The High Court ruled that the 26-year-old victim, Isti Komaraya, died of starvation because the couple failed to provide her with sufficient food and medical attention. Prosecutors said she weighed only 26 kilos and had bruises and scratch marks on her body when she died in a hospital in 2011.
U.S. President Barack Obama has ordered the West's first sanctions in response to Russia's military activity in Ukraine's autonomous region of Crimea. He declared his determination not to let the Kremlin carve up Ukraine. Alan Booknia reports.
Obama's moves came in response to Crimea's Moscow-backed parliament voting to join Russia. It set a referendum on the matter for March 16th. Obama called the proposed vote a violation of the Ukrainian constitution and international law.
Any discussion about the future of Ukraine must include the legitimate government of Ukraine. In 2014, we are well beyond the days when borders can be redrawn over the heads of democratic leaders.
The U.S. sanctions include visa restrictions on Russian and other opponents of Ukraine's government and wider financial penalties against those involved in the military intervention in Crimea or in stealing state assets. Following his press conference, Obama had a 1-hour phone conversation with Russian President Vladimir Putin, but little was resolved. Putin remains adamant that ousted President Viktor Yanukovych remains the legitimate leader of Ukraine. Speaking at a conference in Ireland, Ukraine's former prime minister, released from jail last month, spoke of the need for international pressure.
В мою країну, мою рідну Україну.
Yulia Tymoshenko said, "We don't have a lot of time if we allow Russia on March 16th to hold the referendum at gunpoint. We will lose Crimea and stability throughout the world." Russia's ambassador to the United Nations denied Moscow's involvement in the Crimean parliament's decision.
This is a decision which was taken by the Supreme Soviet of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea.
At an international meeting in Rome to discuss Libya, the situation in Ukraine became the main topic of discussion.
Now, obviously, the attention is above all about Ukrainian crisis. It's normal, it's obviously...
But European leaders disagreed about how far-reaching and forceful the sanctions should be. Meanwhile, the situation remains volatile in eastern Ukraine. In the ethnic Russian city of Donetsk, several pro-Russian protesters were arrested yesterday as police reclaimed a regional administration center seized by demonstrators the day before. Alan Booknia, TVB News.
Anti-government protests in Venezuela have taken another deadly turn. A soldier and a civilian were killed as demonstrators faced off with authorities in a neighborhood in Caracas. The latest violence comes as Venezuela's government takes an increasingly tougher stance against growing international concern about the country's political crisis. James Aiken has more.
Groups of armed men on motorcycles descended on neighborhoods across the capital, apparently on orders to clear street barricades set up by anti-government protesters. Soon, troops in riot gear were dispatched in armored vehicles as soldiers and protesters traded stones and tear gas. This protester says they won't back down no matter how much tear gas is used. The sporadic protests began when Venezuelans became fed up with food shortages, crime, and runaway inflation. Protesters have since begun to focus more on complaints of excessive use of force by authorities and demands for the release of jailed activists. But the administration of President Nicolas Maduro shows no signs of buckling. His government has dismissed demands from the United Nations top human rights body for explanations into alleged abuses against the opposition. And Maduro's government was breaking off all political and commercial ties with Panama. Yesterday, Venezuela expelled Panama's ambassador and 3 other diplomats, giving them 48 hours to leave. Bolivia and Cuba have been quick to show solidarity. Bolivian President Evo Morales echoed claims by Maduro that Panama was taking part in a U.S.-led attempt to interfere militarily in Venezuela to set the stage for regime change. The move has led to speculation that Venezuela is also considering cutting ties with the U.S. But analysts say economic interdependence will likely keep ties intact for now.
There's still, ironically, and paradoxically, a very strong economic commercial relationship. The United States is still the major customer for Venezuelan oil. And even though the sale levels have gone down in recent years, but still the United States buys more oil from Venezuela than any other country.
The protests, which began in mid-February, have left at least 21 people dead, according to the government. James Aiken, TVB News.
A Japanese-American man thought to be the father of Bitcoin has denied any involvement with the digital currency. This after confidence in the virtual currency was badly shaken when one of the world's largest Bitcoin exchanges collapsed over a hacking scam.
Bitcoin may be trying to forge a brave new world of money, but the identity of its inventor remains a mystery. Hounded by the hungry media in California, Dorian Nakamoto insisted he is not the creator of Bitcoin. And before uttering another word,
okay, no questions right now. I want my free lunch.
His denial comes on the heels of a Newsweek magazine article that boldly named him as the creator of Bitcoin's computer code.
I'm not in Bitcoin.
But your address
not in Bitcoin. I don't know anything about it.
Did you create the math for Bitcoin?
Okay, where's my lunch ticket?
Newsweek even used a picture to identify Nakamoto, along with his home address, and estimated his wealth at $400 million US. To that, Nakamoto still insisted on a free lunch.
Wait a minute. I want free lunch first. I'm going to go with this guy.
After having his free lunch, Nakamoto stated he's never had anything to do with Bitcoin.
The main reason I'm here is to clear my name.
But Newsweek stands by its story. Whoever is behind the creation of the virtual currency is known only as Satoshi Nakamoto.
I just believe that somebody put that fictitious name in there. Satoshi Nakamoto and Bitcoin.
The digital currency is bought and sold on a peer-to-peer network independent of central control. But after last week's collapse of Tokyo-based Mt. Gox, once the world's most dominant Bitcoin exchange, it is clear tighter security control is needed. Mt. Gox filed for bankruptcy after it lost Bitcoins and cash worth $500 million US due to hacker attacks.
And when we come back, the chief executive wades into the influx of tourists. An apology from the man once dubbed Japan's Beethoven. And looking ahead to the Rugby Sevens.